Money does not measure intelligence. Thinking does. Two men earn the exact same income. Only one gets richer. The gap is not luck. It is not raw effort. It is not even opportunity. It is how each man thinks about money itself. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. A prince's real power was never his treasury. It was his mind. This is not a video about working harder. This is not a video about clipping coupons. This is a map of the mind itself, laid out in 7 levels. Most people are born on level 1. Most people die there too. A few climb higher. A very few reach the top. Which level are you standing on right now? You are about to find out, and you may not like the answer. Every financial guru sells the same lie, that wealth is a matter of tactics. Save this percentage. Buy this fund. Follow this budget. Tactics matter, eventually, but tactics applied by the wrong mind produce the wrong result every single time. Give a survival thinker a windfall and watch how fast it disappears. Give an ownership thinker a modest salary and watch how patiently it turns into something enormous. The money was never the variable. The mind holding it was. This is why two people can read the same book, watch the same seminar, and walk away with completely different outcomes years later. One absorbs it as information. The other absorbs it as a new way of seeing. Information changes what you know. A new level of thinking changes what you notice, what you fear, what you reach for first when money finally arrives in your hands. Most people assume intelligence about money is the same as intelligence about anything else, a matter of raw brain power, of being naturally good with numbers. It is not. You can meet brilliant men who think about money like children, and you can meet men who left school at 16 who think about it like architects. Wealth intelligence is not IQ. It is a stage, and like any stage, it can be climbed, or it can be permanently avoided, one comfortable excuse at a time. 7 levels stand between where most people start and where the truly wealthy actually operate. Each level is not simply more money. It is a different relationship with money entirely, a different set of instincts running underneath every financial decision you will ever make. Understand these 7, and you understand exactly why the poor stay poor, even after a raise, why the middle class stays anxious, even after saving, and why the wealthy keep getting wealthier even during a recession that terrifies everyone else. Let's begin at the bottom, because almost everyone does. Level number 1, survival thinking, where money is not managed at all, only spent the instant it lands to relieve whatever discomfort feels loudest right now. At this level, money is not a resource. It is a painkiller. It exists to make a specific, immediate discomfort stop. Hunger, a bill collector's phone call, the shame of an empty wallet in front of other people. The moment relief arrives, the money is gone, converted instantly into whatever silences the loudest alarm. Picture 2 men, both handed an unexpected $1,000 on the same afternoon. The first man, operating on survival thinking, feels a wave of relief before he even decides what to do with it. Within a week, the money has vanished into a dozen small comforts he can barely remember afterward. Takeout, new shoes, a night out to celebrate the very windfall that is now gone. The second man, operating on a higher level entirely, feels almost nothing. He asks a single question before spending a cent. What does this money need to become? We will meet him again later. The mechanism behind survival thinking is not stupidity. It is biology. A nervous system under chronic financial threat cannot plan 5 years ahead because it is fully occupied surviving the next 5 days. This is not a character flaw, and Machiavelli, more than almost any writer in history, understood that circumstance shapes behavior far more than most people are comfortable admitting. A man cannot think like a builder while his body is still convinced it is being hunted. Scarcity does not just empty a wallet. It narrows a mind until only the present moment fits inside it. This is why sudden wealth so often evaporates faster than it arrived. Lottery winners, inheritance recipients, athletes with a single enormous contract. Study after study finds the same pattern. Money handed to a survival-level mind gets treated exactly like every other dollar that mind has ever touched, as fuel for the fire directly in front of it. The amount changes. The thinking does not. And thinking that has never been upgraded will eventually spend any sum down to zero, given enough time and enough discomfort to relieve. The tragedy of level 1 is not that these men are lazy or foolish. Most of them work exhausting hours for the money that disappears this fast. The tragedy is that no amount of effort at this level compounds into anything, because the money never survives long enough to be pointed anywhere except at the next fire. A man can work himself into the ground for 30 years on level 1 and end those 30 years with nothing to show for it but exhaustion and a string of relieved, forgotten emergencies. Money spent only on relief never builds anything, because there is always another fire waiting the moment the last one goes out. Escaping level 1 does not require more money. It requires a single, uncomfortable pause. The moment before spending, when a man asks whether this dollar is relieving a fire or building something that outlasts him. Most people never ask that question, not because they cannot, but because the fire always feels too urgent to wait for the answer. The few who learn to ask it anyway, even once, even imperfectly, take the first real step off level 1 and onto the level almost everyone assumes is safety itself. Level number 2, saving thinking, where money is hoarded out of fear and never once put to work. This is the level most people mistake for financial wisdom, and understandably so. A saver looks disciplined next to a spender. He has a number growing in an account somewhere, evidence that he is not level 1 anymore, evidence he can point to when anyone questions his habits. But saving thinking is not wealth intelligence either. It is survival thinking, wearing a more respectable disguise, driven by the exact same nervous system, just aimed at a different, slower kind of threat. Consider a woman who has saved diligently for 15 years, watching every dollar, refusing every unnecessary purchase, building an account balance she is genuinely proud of. Now consider a second woman, equally disciplined, who saves the same amount over the same 15 years, but deploys a portion of it the moment she has enough of a cushion to feel safe doing so. 15 years later, the first woman has a number that has grown only as fast as her own deposits. The second woman has a number that has grown on its own, quietly, even during the months she deposited nothing at all. Both women were disciplined. Only one of them understood that money left sitting still is money declining in value every single year inflation exists. The mechanism here is fear disguised as prudence. A saver at this level does not trust the world enough to let money leave his direct control, even temporarily, even for an opportunity with real, calculable odds in its favor. He would rather watch a pile shrink slowly and invisibly through inflation than watch it fluctuate visibly through investment, because a visible drop feels like a personal failure in a way an invisible one never does. This is not caution. Caution weighs risk against reward and acts. This is simply fear wearing caution's clothing, refusing to act at all. Machiavelli warned princes against exactly this instinct in a different context. That the ruler who hoards his resources purely out of fear of losing them eventually loses far more to stagnation than any bold rival ever takes from him by force. A treasury that never leaves the vault does not protect a kingdom. It simply funds nobody's future, including the prince's own. Saving is not the enemy here. Saving without deployment is. A safety cushion is essential. Every serious thinker at every level keeps one. But a cushion is meant to be stepped off of eventually, not slept on forever. The saver who never graduates past this level mistakes the launch pad for the destination and spends an entire life proud of a number that quietly buys less and less with every year it sits untouched. A pile that never moves is not wealth. It is simply loss, arriving slowly enough to feel like safety. The saver and the survivor look nothing alike from the outside. One anxious and spending, one disciplined and accumulating, but underneath, both are still governed by fear rather than strategy. The next level is where fear finally gives way to something more useful. Effort the saver never had to risk, exchanged directly and honestly for a paycheck. Level number 3, earning thinking, where money is traded directly for time and effort, 1 hour at a time, against a ceiling that never moves. This is the level where most careers, most professional identities, and most of the advice given to ambitious young people quietly stop. Earning thinking feels like real progress, and in a narrow sense, it is. A man on this level has moved past fear entirely. He is not hiding from money, and he is not merely hoarding it. He is actively producing it, trading skill and hours for a paycheck that grows as his skill and reputation grow. For a long time, this feels like winning. Picture a talented lawyer who spends 15 years climbing from associate to partner, billing more hours every year, commanding a higher rate with every promotion. His income triples over that decade and a half, and by every conventional measure, he is thriving. Now picture the ceiling he cannot see yet. There are still only 24 hours in his day, and every one of those hours is already spoken for. He cannot bill a 25th hour, no matter how skilled he becomes. His income has a hard mathematical limit built directly into the structure producing it, and no amount of additional effort will ever break through that limit, because the limit is not a lack of ambition. It is arithmetic. The mechanism at this level is linear exchange. Input produces output on a one-to-one basis, hour for dollar, skill for rate. This is honest work, and it is genuinely respectable, but it is structurally incapable of producing the kind of wealth that compounds while you sleep, because the moment the earner stops trading hours, the income stops with him. There is no version of level 3 that survives a broken leg, a burnout, or a retirement, because the income was never separated from the earner's own physical presence in the first place. Machiavelli observed that a prince who rules only through his own personal strength, never delegating, never building structure beyond himself, is a prince who is only ever one bad year away from losing everything he built. Level 3 earners run their finances the exact same way, as a kingdom of one, entirely dependent on one irreplaceable asset, themselves, showing up, indefinitely, forever. This does not mean earning skillfully is wasted effort. Every level above this one is usually funded, at least at first, by income earned exactly this way. The mistake is not earning well. The mistake is stopping here, mistaking a rising number on a paycheck for actual wealth, when in truth it is simply a louder, more respectable version of level 1, relief measured in a bigger amount, spent on a bigger lifestyle, still entirely dependent on showing up every single Monday for the rest of a working life. You cannot work enough hours to buy back the hours you have already sold, and every hour sold at level 3 is an hour that will never generate a single additional dollar again. The earner who notices this ceiling, usually somewhere in his 30s or 40s, faces the first real fork in this entire progression. He can keep climbing the same linear ladder, trading slightly more valuable hours for slightly larger numbers, or he can take the far less comfortable step of putting some of those hard-earned dollars somewhere they can finally start working without him. Level number 4, investing thinking, where money finally starts working on its own, multiplying quietly whether you are watching it or not. This is the level where the entire equation changes, and most people who reach it describe the same sensation. A strange, almost uncomfortable relief, watching a number grow on a day they did nothing at all to earn it. For the first time, money is no longer only arriving because a person traded hours for it. It is arriving because dollars already earned are now generating more dollars entirely on their own. Return to the two women from level 2, the saver who hoarded and the saver who deployed. The second woman's money, once invested rather than merely stored, begins compounding in a way her own labor never could. A dollar invested at a reasonable return does not simply sit there earning nothing. It earns a return, and next year, that return earns its own return, and the year after that, the return on the return earns a return of its own. None of this requires an additional hour of her time. It requires only patience and the willingness to leave the money working instead of pulling it back out the moment it grows. The mechanism here is compounding, arguably the single most powerful force available to an ordinary person with no special connections and no inherited fortune. Compounding does not care whether you are talented, well-known, or exceptionally hardworking. It only cares whether money has been given enough time and enough consistency to multiply on itself, uninterrupted. This is precisely why investing thinking, even applied modestly, eventually outpaces even the most impressive earning thinking. Earning is linear, capped by the hours in a day, while investing is exponential, capped by nothing except time itself. Machiavelli's princes understood a version of this instinct instinctively, even without modern financial language, that resources left to work quietly, planted and tended rather than hoarded or spent, eventually yield far more than resources merely stockpiled or displayed. A treasury that grows itself is a stronger foundation for a kingdom than a treasury that only shrinks through spending or sits frozen through fear. The investor at this level still has a job, still often trades hours for a paycheck, but a meaningful and growing share of his actual wealth is no longer dependent on him showing up. This is the first level where a man could, in theory, disappear for a year and return to find his money had grown regardless. That single fact changes everything about how he sleeps, how he negotiates, how he views risk at work. Because for the first time, his survival is not entirely hostage to one employer's good graces. Money that only sits in an account will still be there tomorrow. Money that is deployed will be something entirely different tomorrow than it is today. And that difference, repeated across years, is the entire distance between comfortable and wealthy. The trap at this level is subtler than the ones before it. Many investors stop here, satisfied with a portfolio that grows steadily, content to remain a passenger in assets someone else built, someone else runs, someone else ultimately controls. That satisfaction is understandable. It is also, as the next level reveals, still one crucial step short of where real financial power actually lives. Level number 5, ownership thinking, where the goal stops being a share of the output and becomes the asset or the system itself. There is a difference, subtle to describe but enormous in practice, between owning a small piece of something and owning the thing that produces it. An investor at level 4 might own shares in a company, a modest stake entitling him to a modest slice of whatever that company produces. An owner at level 5 wants the company itself, or the rental property itself, or the platform itself, the actual machine generating value, not merely a ticket entitling him to watch someone else run it. Consider two men who both work for the same successful company for 20 years. The first man is an exceptional employee, promoted repeatedly, well compensated, even granted stock options along the way, a level 4 investor riding the company's success from the passenger seat. The second man, after 5 years of learning everything the first man never bothered to learn about how the business actually operates, leaves to start a smaller version of the exact same business himself. 15 years later, the first man retires comfortably on the company's pension and his modest stock gains. The second man sells his own company for a sum that dwarfs everything the first man accumulated across his entire career, because the second man did not settle for a share of value. He built and owned the thing generating it. The mechanism at this level is control over the means of production, not merely a claim on its output. A shareholder benefits when a company does well and suffers when it does poorly, but he rarely controls the decisions that determine which of those outcomes occurs. An owner makes those decisions himself. He decides the pricing, the direction, the pace of growth, the moments to take risk, and the moments to protect what has already been built. This control is not merely psychologically satisfying, it is financially decisive, because the person who controls a system captures a vastly larger share of the value that system creates than anyone merely holding a claim against it. Machiavelli wrote endlessly about the difference between those who hold power and those who merely benefit from proximity to it, and the financial version of this distinction is identical. Proximity to wealth, a good job at a great company, a modest stake in someone else's success, is comfortable. but it is never the same as holding the actual lever yourself. The advisor standing beside the throne, however brilliant his counsel, never accumulates the wealth or the power of the man who actually sits on it. Owning the system is harder than owning a piece of it. It demands more risk, more decision-making, more sleepless nights during difficult stretches no passive shareholder ever has to endure. This is precisely why so few people ever attempt it, and precisely why the ones who do, and who survive the early years, tend to end up wealthier than nearly everyone content to simply hold a claim on someone else's ownership. A share of the harvest feeds you for a season. Owning the field feeds you, and whoever you choose to pass it to, for as long as the field itself survives. The owner has real power now, more than any level before it. But an owner working alone still faces the exact same ceiling the earner faced back at level 3, just at a far higher altitude. There are still only so many hours in his own day, still only so many decisions one person can personally make. The next level is where that ceiling finally disappears for good. Level number 6, leverage thinking, where other people's time, other people's capital, and other people's attention are deliberately multiplied on your behalf. An owner running his own business alone eventually hits the same wall every solo operator eventually hits. He can only work so many hours, oversee so many details, be in so many places at once. Leverage thinking is the deliberate solution to that wall, and it marks the point where a person stops asking what he personally can produce and starts asking what he can cause other resources that are not his own time, to produce instead. Picture the owner from the previous level, now running his company successfully but personally, every decision passing through him, every hour of growth still bottlenecked by his own limited attention. Now picture a second owner, equally capable, who deliberately hires a team he trusts, raises capital from investors willing to fund faster growth than his own savings ever could, and builds an audience that markets his work for him simply by talking about it. The first owner's company grows exactly as fast as he personally can push it. The second owner's company grows as fast as an entire network of other people's time, other people's money, and other people's voices can push it simultaneously in 100 directions he could never manage alone. The mechanism here is multiplication through delegation, and it requires something the earlier levels never demanded: genuine trust in systems and people beyond direct personal control. This is uncomfortable for many owners who reached level 5 precisely because they refuse to depend on anyone else. Leverage asks them to depend on others anyway, deliberately, strategically, in exchange for a growth rate no single person could ever achieve alone. A team's combined hours dwarf one man's hours. Borrowed capital, deployed wisely, dwarfs one man's savings. An audience's collective attention dwarfs one man's personal reach. Machiavelli understood this instinct at the level of statecraft centuries before modern business ever formalized it. That a prince who commands loyal armies, capable ministers, and the genuine goodwill of his people accomplishes more than a prince attempting to personally fight every battle and settle every dispute himself. Power multiplied through others is not weaker than power exercised alone. It is almost always stronger, provided the loyalty and the structure holding it together are genuine rather than merely assumed. This level carries real risk, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. Leverage that is mismanaged, debt taken on recklessly, a team built on the wrong incentives, an audience courted with false promises, can collapse faster and more catastrophically than anything a cautious level 5 owner ever risks alone. This is precisely why leverage thinking belongs at level 6 rather than level 1. It requires every instinct built at the levels beneath it: discipline from saving, productivity from earning, patience from investing, and control from ownership before it can be deployed safely rather than recklessly. One man working alone builds a house. 100 people, each contributing a fraction of their own time and resources toward a shared structure, build a cathedral that outlasts every one of them individually. The leverage thinker has now built something genuinely larger than himself: a business, a fund, a following that produces value at a scale no single lifetime of solitary effort could ever match. But even leverage, for all its power, still ultimately depends on the leverage thinker himself remaining at the center of it, directing it, holding it together. The seventh and final level is the one that finally removes even that last dependency. Level number 7, legacy thinking, where you stop building for your own lifetime and start building structures designed to outlive you entirely. Every level before this one, however sophisticated, still ultimately depended on one person. You, present, capable, making decisions, holding the entire structure together through sheer ongoing involvement. Legacy thinking is the final and rarest shift, because it requires building something specifically engineered to keep functioning, keep producing, keep protecting value, long after you personally have stopped showing up, stopped deciding, stopped existing at all. It is the only level explicitly designed around your own eventual absence. Consider a builder who reaches every prior level successfully. He saves, he invests, he owns his business outright, he leverages a capable team and a loyal following to grow it far beyond what he could manage alone. He is, by any reasonable measure, wealthy. But everything he has built still quietly assumes he remains at the center of it. The moment he steps away permanently, through retirement, illness, or death, the structure begins to wobble, because it was never actually designed to run without him, only to run with his constant, invisible hand somewhere on the wheel. Now consider a second builder, equally successful, who deliberately spends his final working years doing something almost nobody chooses to do voluntarily. Building governance, training successors, documenting systems, distributing decision-making across people and institutions rather than concentrating it in himself. When this second builder finally steps away, nothing wobbles. The structure was engineered from the start to survive him, and it simply continues, because continuing was always the actual design goal, not merely an accidental side effect of success. The mechanism at this level is deliberate institution building rather than personal accumulation. A legacy thinker is no longer optimizing for how much he personally controls or how large his own lifetime numbers grow. He is optimizing for durability that extends past the boundary of his own life entirely, which requires a kind of humility none of the previous 6 levels demand. The willingness to build something magnificent and then, gradually, deliberately, hand the keys to people who will still be turning them long after he is gone. This is precisely the shift Machiavelli spent an entire body of work circling without ever fully naming it. That the truly great rulers were remembered not for the gold in their personal treasury at the moment of their death, but for the institutions, the laws, the structures of governance that continued functioning centuries after the ruler himself had turned to dust. A fortune that dies with its builder was never actually wealth in the fullest sense. It was simply a very large, very temporary advantage, borrowed from the future and spent entirely within one lifetime. Legacy thinking is rare precisely because it asks a person to do the one thing every instinct built at the earlier levels resists: release control, deliberately, while there is still time to do it well, rather than being forced to release it suddenly, unprepared. At the moment, life finally forces the issue regardless of readiness. Every level from 1 through 6 is, in its own way, still about you. Level 7 is the only one that is finally about everyone who comes after you. A fortune spent entirely within one lifetime, however large, is simply a loan from the future, repaid in full the moment its builder is gone. A fortune built to outlive its builder is the only kind of wealth that was ever actually permanent to begin with. 7 levels. Most people spend an entire life circling somewhere between the first 3, never quite noticing that the ceiling above them was never the economy, never the system, never bad luck. It was simply the level of thinking they never upgraded. Look honestly at where you actually operate, not where you would like to believe you operate. Most people who hear this list quietly assume they are further along than they actually are, because admitting the truth means admitting how much room is still left to climb. The survival thinker rarely believes he is a survival thinker. The saver is certain his hoarding is wisdom. The earner is convinced his rising paycheck is already the destination rather than merely the second rung on a much longer ladder. The level you occupy is not fixed. It was learned, mostly by accident, absorbed from whoever raised you, whatever fear or comfort surrounded your first experiences with money. Whatever was learned by accident can be relearned on purpose, one deliberate decision at a time, starting with the very next dollar that passes through your hands. 7 levels stand between where you started and where the truly wealthy actually think. Most people will read this list, nod, and change nothing. A few will recognize exactly where they are standing and start climbing today. If this shifted the way you see money, then don't stop here, because what you've heard in this video is only the surface. There are deeper layers to psychology, influence, and wealth that simply can't be explored fully in one video. Not because they don't exist, but because most people aren't ready to hear them. That's why most stay average. If you're not one of them, then subscribe, because every video here is designed to sharpen your mindset, increase your value, and separate you from the crowd. No fluff, no noise, just strategy. Most people will watch this and move on. A few will stay and change. Decide which one you are.